This is the show dedicated to raising up the next generation of men of faith and character. My name is Mark Stanifer. Welcome to the Next Man Up. Well, hey guys, welcome back to the Next Man Up podcast. So good, as always, to have you with us. And I am joined today, once again, by my sidekick, co-host, my partner in crime, Josh Wilson.
Hey, hey.
Good to see you, man.
Great to see you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be in the podcast studio again.
It's always good to have you here, man. And I'm excited to get into this topic today. I think we're gonna have a little fun with this word alpha and what it means.
I think so too.
Before we get into today's subject and topic, I want to just pause once again to inform you or remind you that our new video course is here. It's called Forging Men, Rediscovering the Ancient Path to Manhood. And if you are a dad who's raising a boy that's 16 or under, someone that you really love and care for, if you want that boy to become a healthy and a godly man down the road, if you want to be more strategic and intentional in your fathering, and if you want a vision and a process that brings everything together for this bigger purpose, then Forging Men is for you. It's a self-paced video course that launches on April 2nd with a group of other dads who are like-minded that want to learn how to build a customized initiation process to take their boy from being a boy into manhood so that he knows what it means to be a man. He knows what's expected when he arrives, and he's welcomed and celebrated into and by the community of men in his life. If this is getting you excited and sounds like a tool that you want in your father toolbox as you're raising your son, then head out to our website, thenextmanup.com/forgingmen, and get all the information you need and get yourself signed up to join us on April 2nd. We would love to have you as part of this next group, and I can't wait for you to experience the benefits that come from guiding your son on his path to manhood through the initiation process. Once again, it's thenextmanup.com/forgingmen. Head out there, get all the information, get yourself signed up, and join us beginning on April 2nd. So, when you hear the term alpha,
Yeah.
What do you, like, generally speaking, what do you think of, or what is it that most people think of?
I mean, SEAL Team 6, I think, would be the first thing that comes to my mind. What's his name? Jock, the author guy, former SEAL team member. I mean, like, super aggressive, super type A.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hard driving, and a little bit just kind of mean.
Okay.
I don't think that a classic alpha male would think that they're being mean. I think they're just saying, I think there's this idea that they're just being honest about life.
Okay. So let's just get to the point and call it like it is type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And harsh. There's like this harsh truth kind of thing that they're kind of bringing of like, you know, you need to wake up at 3:30 in the morning. If you don't, then you're weak kind of deal.
Yeah. I'm kind of envisioning a similar type of thing in a boardroom or with a C-suite title, you know, that hard charging, take no prisoners, I'm going to get what I want and you can either join me or get out of the way type of mentality.
Yeah, and not just that, there's also this belittling thing to the alpha male. So if you're not an alpha male with them, then you're beneath them.
Less than.
And there's also this thing. So I recently watched The Last Dance about Michael Jordan.
Oh yeah.
And it was fascinating to watch Michael Jordan in these interviews, and the way that he was described by his fellow players is, yes, he pulled his fellow players up to this higher standard, but everything was a competition with him.
Yeah.
Like everything, like who could put their shoes on faster, or like who could like wear their hat better. I mean, everything. And anytime that there's any sort of slight against him and his dominance, it was a threat to his to him personally, and it had to be met, and he had to win in order to reestablish his dominance thing. That sounds like a terrible way to live.
I feel exhausted just thinking about trying to live in an environment like that.
I mean, if I would just like check out of that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what was fascinating of watching Michael Jordan in these interviews is he was in this gigantic house all alone by himself. No real relationship with his kids, no real relationship with, I think, his ex-wife. I believe he's divorced. I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure entirely.
I think you're right.
But I couldn't imagine trying to like grow up under that sort of pressure.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is that's how Michael Jordan grew up. His
So
dad belittled him.
It's what he knew.
So he was just copying what he'd seen.
So there's that. And then there's this that's running through my mind. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and
lose their soul?
Be completely alone, have no relationships, have no community, have no peace or fulfillment or security, right? Like however you add on to and lose your soul, it sounds like that's at least in part maybe what he was experiencing.
But you won, so there's that.
Well, winning does cover a lot of shortfalls, or sins, if you will, or at least in that type of an environment, winning can justify the ends, can kind of justify some of the means.
Yep. And like you look at Michael Jordan, like he's easily the greatest of all time.
Right.
Like there's no one else has done what Michael Jordan did. So like that is a way to achieve excellence. But basketball is a weird way to measure your success in life.
Yep. That's right.
Anyway.
That's right. So pulling us back a bit from the Michael Jordan riff, which was cool and unexpected, and coming back to perceptions of alpha, I think, well, here's what I'll say. You can agree or disagree. I think the general perception of alpha today in the context of males is negative.
Yes. I think there's maybe a 50-50 split on that. So some think it's super healthy and some think it's not.
Oh, so maybe those that think it's super healthy are not as enlightened. Maybe they're misinformed. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying, instead of me putting words in your mouth, how about you say it?
I think if you're an alpha, you think that it's good. And if aren't an alpha, then you don't.
Got it. So what if we've misunderstood what it means to be an alpha, and we've taken some of the characteristics out of context, emphasized them, and have kind of missed the point?
I think that's right. I mean, I think that a lot of, even the term alpha comes from nature. So, it comes from the Greek alphabet. Whatever. But the point is that like a lot of the model that we have for like alpha wolf is like, or alpha male is alpha wolf,
right?
Or alpha dog or whatever, the leader of the pack.
From the pack, exactly.
And there seems to be this idea that those dogs or wolves that become the leaders of the pack are the ones that are the most aggressive and the most domineering over everyone else. Like that's and I think that like alpha males end up patterning themselves off of that idea of how you achieve leadership.
Fight and scrap and climb and claw over whoever you need to in order to get to the top.
Right.
Yeah. But
I think the model's wrong. Or I should say, I've come to believe that the model is wrong. And that came out of a book that I recently finished reading called The Wisdom of Wolves. And, you have to take the authors with a little bit of a grain of salt that they are very much wolf advocates.
That's right.
They're gonna weave the story that they want to tell in order to advocate for wolves. But I think what they have to say about what they saw in this wolf pack is different than the vision that we have of wolves now.
Yes. And some direct application to how we understand what it means to be a true and healthy leader of the pack, a true and healthy alpha, because it's not what we've been describing. The general understanding is
right. What they saw in this wolf pack was significantly different from the way that we seem to think that alphas operate.
So I've read the book a while ago, loved the book, and you just finished it. So I'm curious, what are some of those conclusions that you're drawing, having just read the book? What are some of the conclusions about either misunderstanding or a better way to understand what it means to be an alpha as it applies to being a man?
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, I just want to, because we've read the book. Our listeners may not have.
Oh, fair enough. So what is this book?
Let me just kind of give a little bit of context here. So this book, The Wisdom of Wolves, was written by a couple named Jim and Jamie Dutcher, and they spent, I think it was like 5 years, literally living with a wolf pack. It's called the Sawtooth Pack, and they had this 25-acre enclosure in Idaho back in the early mid 90s, and they hand raised these wolves and then basically let the pack do whatever the pack wanted to do inside this 25-acre enclosure. They just lived with them and observed them, tried to be as hands off as they possibly could, and then they wrote this book, The Wisdom of Wolves. That's the most recent recounting of this experience with them. They did a documentary about this as well. I think came out in like 2002, I think, or something like that.
It's fascinating to watch.
I haven't watched it. I'm very interested. And Jim Dutcher is actually a well-known nature documentary filmmaker, and he was shooting this on behalf of National Geographic, and he shot some other films before this. One was on cougars and one was on beavers, I believe. And so this is kind of like his third big National Geographic thing. And this was actually the last nature documentary that he did, because he became a wolf advocate after doing this project.
Yep.
And so they spent 5 or 6 years with this, like, I think it was like 13 or 14 member wolf pack. And it was fascinating what they learned. And they in the book, they kind of shared a series of lessons that they learned. I think it was like 12 or 13 lessons that they learned over the course of their time. And 3 of them really stood out to me. One was about alphas and their position in the pack. The other was actually about omegas and their position in the pack, which is the exact opposite.
Yep.
And then the third was about the young, the pups, and how they come up through the pack, and the importance of the alpha and the omega both in making sure those pups grow up to be successful wolves.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's get a little bit deeper into some of those conclusions, lessons that you drew out. Because I was thinking specifically about alpha, but as I hear you describe it, there's a broader application, like a community application, right? The pack, right?
Yeah, there's no such thing as a lone wolf. Like
exactly.
There might be a wolf that breaks off for a little while, but they always come back to a pack of some sort. They either start their own or they will join a pack. Lone wolves don't last long in nature by themselves.
So that's so interesting, because I was talking with a guy just a couple of days ago, and part of his story was this drive to prove that he could do it on his own, this independent streak. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just, I need to feel like I've got confidence and I can accomplish. It was the John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, lone wolf type of myth that as a younger guy, he was subscribing to, even though he didn't fully realize it. And so what you just said is there's evidence in the wolf kingdom, in the animal kingdom with wolf packs in general, that lone wolves, they don't make it.
No. They're actually in very dangerous territory. They're very vulnerable. If they get hurt, if they can't, I mean, it's very, like, most wolves can't hunt alone. They need a pack in order to bring down the kind of game they bring down.
And so one could argue that as humans, we're pack animals as well. And wherever we developed this idea of men need to be lone wolves and do it all on their own, it puts us at risk and it's serious danger. And maybe not from external attack, but from isolation, which is a documented problem, from just being in our own head, from the walls that we put up around us emotionally to prevent connections. And I didn't mean to co-opt the discussion here, but hearing you think about, or hearing you say that, makes me think that there's a lesson from the wolf pack right there, that we need to rethink and revisit this whole inclination that alphas are lone wolves. They're individualistic. That's not at all the case.
No, but wolf packs are very territorial. So the idea that all wolves live in peace with each other isn't necessarily true either.
Fair enough. So we can only, I think the word is anthropomorphize.
Yes.
To a point,
Yes,
where then the comparison breaks down. But keep going.
Okay, so I think back to how we started this conversation with alphas, with alpha males and alpha wolves. This impression that alpha wolves are just super vicious and aggressive and use violence whenever they can because they almost enjoy it, kind of thing. And like the reason why they're the alpha is because they just dominated the rest of them, and beat them down, and that's not really how, at least for the Sawtooth Pack, that's not how Kamutz was that became the alpha wolf. There was a personality thing that, like, he was more dominant. In other words, he took charge, but it was almost as though Kamutz actually he took on the responsibility of the pack.
Okay.
So it wasn't that he beat everyone else and achieved dominance, is that he was willing to take responsibility for the well-being of the pack.
To shoulder some of the responsibility for being out in front.
Yeah. Now, it wasn't that he was never used aggression, because they were the wolf pack.
These are wolves,
right? Like
right?
the wolves, right?
Yeah.
And so the way they communicate is through snarls and everything that you think about when you have like wolves do those sorts of things, But it wasn't that he would just like bully everyone around him. And what was interesting is the author shared a story of another pack that was in Yellowstone. This was during the wolf reintroduction stuff in the early 90s. So there were several different wolf packs that were being introduced in the United States from Canada. And there's a wolf pack that was in Yellowstone. And there was a female that was just a bully. And she had kind of accidentally achieved the alpha female role in the pack, but was very insecure about her role there, her position. And so she would bully the rest of the females in the pack all the time, just needlessly violent with them. And her sister somehow managed to have a litter of pups without her sister, this other alpha female, realizing what was going on. And suddenly this sister became the alpha female of the pack. Mm. And the pack turned on the previous alpha female and killed her because she was a needless bully and vicious for no reason. And so this idea that alpha wolves achieve their position by just beating everyone else down, wolves will find a reason to replace that leader if it's a bad leader.
So insecurity can translate to bullying and domineering type of behavior, which the pack recognizes is not what they want. It's not beneficial. It's not healthy.
Yeah, and if they can find an excuse to replace that leader, they will. And I think that's really interesting. I think that I don't know about this. Maybe I'm treading on thin ice here, but it seems to me as though most alpha males are doing their alpha male bullying, like posturing thing, because they're actually insecure about who they are. Mm. That's not a strong leader. That's a weak leader who has a strong shell around them.
Yep.
I think.
I think you're right on. I think the application in the wolf kingdom translates directly to the human kingdom. And what we often see as this physical, aggressive, bullying type of behavior is really just it's a facade to cover up some insecurity underneath. And it's not 100% of the time, but it's not 1% of the time either. It's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah, and I think when we say by bullying and belittling, I would describe that as doing things to other people to intentionally make them feel smaller than you. Mm. So it's not that you are enforcing your position in the hierarchy. It's that you're intentionally going out to undermine other people and destroy them.
Yep.
And that makes for a weak team.
That's right.
Because now everyone's on edge. Everyone's nervous about their position in the pack. What's interesting is with the Sawtooth Pack, the ones that were the most easily anxious and agitated were actually the people that the wolves that were in the middle of the pack. Because they were always concerned about where their position was in the pack.
Yep.
And the lower down on that hierarchy that they got, the more anxious they were about their position in the pack. What was so interesting about Kamutz was he would literally patrol the perimeter of their enclosure by himself, scouting out danger on behalf of the pack. And he would always sleep a little bit separate from the pack so that he could hear his surroundings without them being muffled by the noise of the pack.
So responsibility.
It was
shouldering the burden for responsibility of the benefit of the pack.
Yeah, he had to do more work because he was responsible for the well-being of the pack.
Yeah.
Which actually brings me to the second lesson, which is the Omega, the bottom of the pack. So the Omega, on the other hand, you would think has no responsibility. They actually have a very specific role in the pack, and that's to diffuse the tension. So the way the Dutchers describe the Omega of the pack is the court jester. Mm. So the way that wolf packs seem to, at least the Sawtooth Pack, seem to blow off anxiety, blow off stress, was to play. And the Omega could feel the stress of the pack growing and the dysfunction beginning to grow, and knew that if he didn't diffuse the tension, that he was going to be the one that they all turned on.
Right.
And so it was in the Omega's best interest to initiate play as often as they possibly could.
Interesting.
So it actually brought emotional health to the group, to the pack, because the Omega was trying really hard to keep everything balanced. You know?
Right. Because the animal knew that if things got out of hand or too uptight, that the Omega would be the target of that frustration or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's not that the Omega in a wolf pack is the outcast. They actually serve a very important role, and they're kind of like the pressure release valve for the pack.
Interesting.
So when you think about like your youngest kid who's always trying to find ways of like not taking responsibility,
yep,
it's because they're trying to diffuse the emotional tension of your family, most likely.
Yeah.
Now, assuming, of course, that we actually operate like wolf packs in our families, which might not necessarily be true.
No, but there's probably enough similarity that we can draw from. The other thing that I'm thinking as you're talking is, so I guess a couple of thoughts. One, we're part of a lot of different packs. You know, we're part of the family home pack or the friend pack or the organization or business or community pack, right? And inside a healthy pack, there are multiple people that play different roles. Mm-hmm. And as an alpha in a pack, whatever pack that is, and there's application for how we live individually as men, but if there's responsibility as the alpha of the pack, there's also benefit in knowing the other roles that are helpful to keep a pack healthy and growing and moving together. Mm-hmm. One of which is that stress reliever or that play initiator or the individual that keeps things from being too serious or too quote unquote all business all the time, right? In the wolf pack, it's the omega.
Yeah. And I appreciate that about my wife. So my wife is the youngest of three. And she, like, if it was left to my own devices, my family would be a little bit, well, more than a little bit. We'd be far too serious, far too boring. And I appreciate her because she actually helps me not live in that space.
Yeah.
And I'm not even like a tightly wound, like type A personality. I'm generally easygoing, but I know that my propensity would be to like wind my household up into some like no joy, get things done fest. So she like completely diffuses the tension of our household, and I greatly appreciate her for
That's
it.
right.
I'm not saying that she's the omega.
No, again, the metaphor, analogy, comparison, whatever it is, right? It breaks down at some point, but I think that the ideas that you're pulling from the book and what the Dutchers recognized has application in how we think about pack life as humans and how we think about redefining, recapturing what it means to be alpha. Like, what does alpha really mean? And it's not what we've seen on display. And it's not just we need to get rid of alpha or the alpha concept. No, I think we need to rediscover really what it means and gravitate toward the healthy, beneficial aspects, which were on full display in this Sawtooth pack.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that this captive pack would be as healthy as it was. You would think that they would be really dysfunctional because they want to be like trying to get out of the enclosure, but they actually were really comfortable and apparently really healthy and successful as a pack. They raised pups. They did really well. Speaking of pups, the third lesson that I kind of pulled from the book, or thing that jumped out of the book, was the way that the young of the pack, the pups, would grow up. And it was really interesting that pups didn't have they didn't really fit into the general hierarchy of the pack until they were, adults. I think after like a year or so, they finally were considered, adult wolves and could find, their pecking order in the pack.
Yep.
They kind of existed in this world outside the pack. They didn't have to worry about the hierarchy. They just had to be pups and learn a bunch of stuff. They made mistakes, that'd be fine. But they weren't left to their own devices. And they were actually, there's a story of Kamutz, the alpha male, seemed to realize that one of the female pups was being far too timid. And he actually was a little bit harder on her in order to toughen her up. The way the authors talk about it, it's almost as though he took the role of a drill sergeant with Chimuk, I think her name was, to toughen her up, is the way they put it, to make her stronger so that she could be a fully functioning member of the pack.
Interesting. That
they weren't just going to let pups do whatever they wanted to do. They took an active role in guiding them and raising them to become productive members of the pack. I think we need to do the same thing with our children. We can't just let our children do whatever they want and hope that they grow up to be productive members of society or productive members of our family. We have to be intentional about noticing where our kids need to grow and push them in that direction. Not demand it of them, not aggressively chase them in that direction, but we have to push them. We have to or at least maybe invite them into growth. Because we have a better view of who they are, who they need to become versus where they are now, and we've got to make that. We've got to make that initiation.
And we have a few more tools at our disposal than wolves do. We don't have to just snarl and run them around. But what I like about what you're saying is that the leader, the alpha, was aware. Understood what was going on within the pack, with the kids, the pups of the pack, and recognized that one pup needed one thing that the other pups didn't necessarily need in order to help this pup to grow.
Well, what's so interesting about Chimook is she actually became the alpha female of the pack later on. So whatever Kamutz was doing for her while she was a pup paid off. She allowed the pack to flourish later on. Kind of cool.
It is kind of cool. And the other thing that comes to mind is he was able to see, and again, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but he could see potential that she couldn't see in her, and was trying to call it out and draw it out and push her through some adversity, some challenge, some difficulty, some discomfort at least, in order to help her to see, perhaps, and again, maybe I'm reading into this, but maybe he was helping her to see what he could see as the potential that was there. That's cool.
I think that sounds about right.
That's cool. Well, is there anything else that you want to call out? Because I mean, those are super good insights, and I think direct application to us as men and alphas and pack life here in the human kingdom.
Well, I just one thing that has to do with the business world. I read another book. This is probably a decade ago, called "Good to Great."
Yep.
You've
Jim
read it.
Collins, I
Jim
believe.
Collins, yeah. So, and he wrote a couple of follow-on books to that as well. And what was interesting, I believe it was in this book, he described that the most successful CEOs were not the ones with the most aggression in them. They're actually the ones that are the most calm and collected, and brought unity and balance to their companies. The most successful CEOs were the most unassuming.
Interesting.
And it seems to me as though, at least from the Sawtooth Pack, that the most unassuming leader was actually the most successful one. So when it's not that they were weak leaders, they're actually very strong leaders, but they just weren't.
They didn't have to demonstrate it through aggression, domineering, bullying, those types of things. Back to how we started this conversation. When we think of alpha, those are the types of traits that often come to mind. But it's so much more, and it can be so much better.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that as a father in your family that you should just roll over and let your kids do whatever they want.
Right.
That's not actually how leaders work.
That's right.
Like, there's a place to assert a little bit of dominance of like, hey, this is what the hierarchy is, and I am leading here. Don't challenge me on this. Like, there's a place for that, but it's not a place where you belittle or put someone in their place. I guess it comes out of a relationship, actually.
Bingo.
So Jesus shared this story that we call the prodigal son, and it was actually mostly we think about the younger son takes off and kind of does the party thing, and then comes back and grovels and comes back in the family, and the dad throws a huge party. That's kind of like the very very short version of it.
That's right.
They also talk about the older son who's like hacked off because the brother gets invited back into the family, right?
Right.
Well, really the story is about dysfunctional relationships between both the boys and their dad. You have a slave and an orphan. One who thinks he has to achieve things in order to get his dad to accept him. The other one who thinks he doesn't have a father figure that actually cares about him at all, so he'll take off.
Yep.
And we're actually trying to be the father that has a relationship with their sons so that we can lead them into becoming men.
Yeah.
And when you bully, when you belittle, when you act like a steroid jacked up alpha, like that's just going to alienate your sons, and then we're back in the same place of a fatherless generation.
Right on.
So anyway, not to be too heavy-handed about that, but
no, it's a great way. It's a great spot to finish because you bring it full circle to building on that relationship and not on position or authority. And that's there. It's built into the role of being a father, and it's important at times to exercise some of that position and authority, just like Kamutz did with Chimook, right? But it's about the relationship first. And when you have that, boy, things just they just go much better for pack life, for that individual relationship, for that for the adult, for the man that boy will eventually become as well. Mm-hmm. Well, listeners, what are you taking away from this? What are you hearing? What resonates with you? What are you going to do as a result of the last half an hour or so of this discussion and rethinking alpha and rediscovering a healthy way to embrace what it means to be a leader of the pack and shoulder the responsibility for the well-being of your pack? What is it that you are taking away? If you're interested in reading a little bit more about the insights, Josh pushed an article to our blog. I'll link that in the show notes. If you have questions or feedback or would like to share some of your takeaways from today's episode, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. And just another quick reminder that on April 2nd, begins the next group of our Forging Men, and you can get all the information and get signed up on our website, thenextmanup.com/forgingmen. All right, that's it for today. Josh, thanks once again.
Always good to be here.
And listeners, thank you for being with us. And as always, until next time,
adios.
Hey, listeners, thanks for journeying with us on this Next Man Up podcast. You know, we would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a question or an idea, perhaps a topic for us to consider. If that's you and you want to reach out to us, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. That's feedback@thenextmanup.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you later.